So thank you, everybody, for joining us at the Move Podcast. My name's Scotty Carlisle. I'm the host. And today we have a very special guest, which we always do. And I always say it, but it's true. So I can continue. So today we have Bob Donnell. And Bob, I have been social media acquaintances for a while, but we actually met at a mutual friend's house. I was bartending at one of the parties she threw, and she's connected to a bunch of high-level people. And I met Bob there at the bar. What were you drinking? It was
Iced tea.
Iced tea. I thought.
No, ever drink.
Well, I was thinking like it was a gin and tonic or something, but okay, so strike one for me. Obviously, we talked for a bit, and then we became friends on social media, and I've seen you post different things, and I kind of got familiar with your story, or at least part of it, and so it's a very special guest, guys. I'm going to ask him a bunch of questions, and I just wanted to kind of get an idea of what brought him. So he has an organization called Next Level by Association, and he's been in the coaching space, and he's been an international speaker, and he's got a lot of accolades, and those accolades came at a price. He's had severe adversity in his life, and I just wanted to kind of uncover this. So if there's anybody out there, maybe his story will resonate with you. And Bob, thank you again for showing up to the podcast. I really appreciate your time, man.
Thank you, Scotty. I appreciate the opportunity.
So could you give us a little background on who you are for those of us out there that are that are not familiar with your story? Could you give us a little background of who you are?
Sure. Yeah. My mom was a single mom raising me. Both of my brothers were 10 and 9 years older, so they were already out of the house. But at 15, my mom came to me and sat me down and said, I've been diagnosed with cancer. I've been given 6 months to live. I'm going to live longer than that. I'm going to beat it, but you just need to know. And so I don't know anything about my dad, don't know anything about him or have ever met him or anyone I know has ever met him. So I was basically being told that I was going to be an orphan in 6 months unless mom was able to beat it. And about maybe 6 months after that, I remember a gentleman came up to me and says, "Hey, Bob, I got a question for you. What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I remember thinking, why is this guy asking a 15-year-old kid what he wants to be when he grows up? And I said, why? And he goes, well, you can learn a product, a service, or an industry, or you can learn something that drives every product, every service, in every industry. And I said, what's that? And he goes, human behavior. If you understand human behavior, you can help anyone with anything. And I said, okay, sign me up, kind of facetiously, joking. And he says, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to go back to school and become a peer counselor. I'm like, okay. So I go back to school and I become a peer counselor, and I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of cool. I mean, I like what I'm learning and everything. And then fast forward to, my mom died when I was a senior in high school. So a couple of years later, she died. And we went to, I went to starting, working with kids that I was doing already. And I had an attorney that was a parent, a stepdad of one of the kids I was working with. And he says, I need you to come by the office today. And I'm thinking, what did I do wrong? Why is this attorney wanting me to come by his office? I mean, I've been to his house. I've gone to his house. I've worked with this kid. Why am I going to the house? Or to his office? And I get there and he says, you're doing a really good job, but you need to play a bigger game. And I remember thinking, what's a bigger game look like? I mean, I'm working with kids just kind of willy-nilly, but what do you mean? He goes, you need a board of directors, you need a psychologist, a psychiatrist, you need some people of credibility. And I went, okay. And he goes, so put together a board of directors. I said, who's going to stamp approval on a 19-year-old kid? He goes, well, if you have an attorney on your board of directors, people will feel safe about being protected. And I said, okay. And he goes, I'll be the attorney on record. So great. So that was kind of the preemptive thing about leading me into this position. Shortly before that, July 1979, so I was 15 years old. July 1979, I had a gentleman invite me to go to this church youth camp. So I go to this youth camp in Oklahoma. And I remember on July 1979, feeling just this calling. Now, I didn't know if it was going to be a pastor. I didn't know if it was going to be a youth minister. I didn't know, but I just knew that there was a calling on my life to share my life experiences with people. So I immediately went to one of the cabins at the youth camp, and I said, hey, do you have a group of kids tonight? And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, I'd like to come speak. And he goes, what are you going to speak on? I said, I had no idea, but I'm available. And he goes, all right, come on. So I spoke. That was my first speaking engagement ever, July 19, 1979. And that kind of set me on the trajectory. Then you fast forward, 6 months later, I'm told all of this about being a peer counselor. Then I'm setting up my nonprofit. And my board of directors included psychologists, psychiatrists, marriage family therapists, sergeant of narcotics for Los Angeles County PD, and an author, a vice principal of a public school. And those people became not only my credibility, but they also became my training ground, because a lot of those people would work with any kid I brought to them for free or a family, but only on one condition, and that is that I had to be included in all sessions that they were giving away. And that was a great learning for me, a great education for me. So that's kind of how it got started.
So, wow, that's an early start in this whole thing, and so you've been doing it for quite some time now.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it in a lot of different ways. One, there wasn't a really business behind that, there wasn't a coaching business per se. I didn't have a degree. I didn't have a psychology or psychiatry, or psychiatric or anything like that. So my education was basically from my mentors. And then how do you develop that? Well, I had a lot of jobs in between then and when I started officially working with people as a coach, or whatever you want to call it at that point. But before, well, nobody knew what coaching was other than in sports.
So at what point did you start doing other speaking engagements?
I began speaking, anytime I could possibly be invited to speak. I was speaking at funerals. I was speaking at, networking events. I was speaking at Rotaries and all that kind of stuff. Because in my nonprofit, I had to raise capital. So I had to raise funds. So that's where I started doing that speaking. Then I kind of evolved and started doing some other business consulting and some training. And was really blessed, again, just to have some incredible mentors in my life over the years, and working with every kind of organization you could possibly imagine, small, medium-sized companies to large corporations. I was invited to come in and speak and share. And then over the course of time, it just kind of evolved into the coaching business, evolved into helping people personally and professionally. So my company name is Everything Next Level. And people say, well, what is that? Well, it's everything next level. What do you want to change? Let's take it to the next level, whatever that is, personally and professionally. And so that's what kind of evolved over the many years. And I've just been blessed to have great mentors in my life and great affiliations with amazing people.
So the Everything Next Level, would you say you focus more with companies, or is it one-on-one?
More, my real focus is to working with the leaders. So it can be one or it can be, many. But my real focus is to work with the leaders where I can impact the most amount of people. If I impact the leader, they can impact the corporation, they can impact the family, they can impact whatever it is. So that's really my biggest focus.
And do you have a standard protocol that you typically take somebody through? Let's say it's a business leader that maybe is having issues, and so he reached out to you and he's like, hey, I need help. I I need help with my emotions, or is it more of an internal that you help work with them, or is it more of a external on, numbers and activities and accountability and stuff like that? Where do you fit?
They tell me where they're struggling, where the challenges that they want help with, and then I help them. So my idea is to develop a criteria or develop a strategy that aligns their behavior with their desired result. You tell me what you want, we'll create a behavior that will lead you to that. The problem is most people are going, here's what I want, but they don't know the behavior that's going to be necessary to get there, so they're just shooting in the dark. So my thing is aligning behavior with desired results. Tell me what the desired result is. Let's create a behavior to do that, and then let's implement and execute it.
Do you find that so you create a behavior that's going to align with that result, that would be relatively a simple, not easy, simple process, but then the part of holding them accountable, and do you find a lot of resistance? Like, let's say, because my experience, people that own businesses are pretty hard-headed. They like to do things the way they like to do. And sometimes you have advice because on the periphery, you can see, oh, look, this is what's going on. And so you got it, right? But then that requires them to change what they're used to. And then again, with a lot of times people in those situations are hard-headed. And what do you do when you come across, or do you come across that? Or is it usually you're like, this is it, and then they just do what you say?
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. They resist a lot of times. My background, because I was trained with suicide prevention, crisis intervention is my specialty. My background is intervening for people, helping them to make better decisions. So it's not so much telling them what to do, it's helping them intervene for themselves so they make the decision on their own. In suicide prevention, you've only got maybe one chance sometimes. So you better be able to take the path that produces the greatest result with the least amount of effort. And so in that aspect, my specialty is really intervening, helping people make quick decisions on a moment's notice. Because a lot of times, when you're dealing with suicide prevention or crisis intervention, you don't get more than one chance. You get one chance. And so I've been very fortunate to be in situations where I've been able to help a lot of people through a lot of crisis situations, including suicide, including, everything that you can imagine.
Well, you've been doing it for a while, so I can imagine that you've had I can only imagine it, some of the stories that you probably have. Is there any that pop up front of mind of a situation that was kind of a dire situation and then the aftermath?
Yeah, I can think of a whole bunch of them, but I'll give you one. One was I was called by a friend of mine, and she says, "Hey, Bob, can you come over and help my aunt? She wants to commit suicide. She's 80 years old. She wants to commit suicide." And I said, "Sure." So I drove over there, and I knew kind of the background. She'd been going through a tough time, but it really wasn't an emotional situation for her. So I'm like, I don't understand why this is. So I walk in the room, and I immediately trying to assess what's happening. So I walk into the room and I said, "So you're the one that wants to die?" And I remember the lady who called me over was like, "What are you doing?" And I go, "What? She already knows. I'm not saying anything new." And so the lady's, "Yeah." I go, "Okay. Any particular reason?" She goes, "I just don't want to be here." And she was apathetic. And the difference between Scotty, the difference between apathy and depression is vast. Apathy means no matter what you change in my life, I still want to die. I don't care. Depression is something you can grab onto and hold and pull closer to you and get some resolution made. apathy is the worst in a crisis situation, because nothing you can do is going to make them change their behavior or what they want to accomplish. And I just remember saying, wow. So after about probably 45 minutes of going back and forth and really doing a lot of pattern interrupts and helping her kind of determine where she was really at and why she was there, I was getting nowhere. I mean, she was literally not budging. She had shark eyes. I mean, if you've ever known, I'm talking about shark eyes. It was like nothing. There was no emotion. There was just cold steel. And I remember thinking, man, if I don't do something quick, something's going to happen. This is not going to end up good, or I'm not going to be able to leave. And I remember just looking at her, and I said, so, your kids, they're grown, they're fine. What about your animals? They're fine. They'll just go with the kids. There's zero emotion, no matter what I pulled up. And finally, I had to use what I call a pattern interrupt for this particular situation. And I basically told her she was a blank, selfish bitch. And she just looked at me and she went, oh. And then I knew I had her. I knew that we moved beyond apathy. Now she was concerned with what I called her. And I knew that what was important there was I had to be more uncomfortable than she was. And my mom would have washed my mouth out with soap for her saying that to an elderly person, much less anyone else. And I remember thinking, I got her because I was willing to be even more uncomfortable than she was. And so that was one of those situations. She's still alive today, I mean, many years later. And I got a really nice letter from her, a couple of days later after that. And that's one of those situations. I mean, I've been in a lot of different situations. I've been in situations where after shooting, after crisis, after like the Las Vegas shooting, going up and being there, visiting people in the hospital, visiting people at the Uvalde school shooting in Texas this last year and a half.
So specifically the 91, Route 91. So you actually went up there and talked to some people, some victims?
I went up there the day, 2 days after. And so when I go to a situation like that, like the Saugus school shooting, Uvalde in Texas, or Vegas, I go there for one thing, and that's just to be present and be available to people. I'm not going there with any mission. I'm not going in there with any affiliation. I'm not going in there to say I'm going to do something. I'm going there to just be present. So, Highway 91 or Highway 91, I went there just to be there. And they had the memorials out in the street, in the center of Las Vegas Boulevard. And I remember just walking out there and just standing there. And as I walked up, I saw an officer there, and I said, I see people standing in the middle of the street. Is that acceptable? And she said, yeah, it's safe. It's okay there. And I said, okay. So she goes, what are you doing here? I said, I came from California. I'm just here to be a resource. She goes, for what? Are you with what? And I said, I'm just here by myself. And she goes, okay. So she was kind of taken aback. And at first she was kind of like hesitant, but then she kind of warmed up to the idea. And so I'm just going to go over here and stand here. And, they had the memorial out. So they had, people standing there with candles and stuff. And I walked up and I was just looking at all these pictures of people. And I walked up next to this young girl, and she was just standing, probably about 20. And she's just standing there looking at this picture of this young girl, and she's crying. And my goal is to not go and hug them or go. My goal is just to be. And I walked over and I stood there, and you give somebody enough opportunity and they'll seize it. And she did. She turned around. She looked at me, and I just smiled. I said, how well did you know her? And one thing I know about connecting is when you ask a better question, you get a better answer. And I said, how well did you know her? She goes, she's my best friend in high school. I said, wow. She goes, yeah. I said, can you tell me something like a fond memory that you have of her? She says, oh, yeah. And she pulls out her phone, and she's like, oh, look at all these pictures. This one, her and her boyfriend knew that I didn't have a date for the prom, so they took me to the prom. And look at all these pictures. And she's showing me all these pictures. And I'm thinking, wow, this is really amazing. And it was in that moment that I was just like, this is my calling. To be that catalyst for somebody who, where they're at right now, to help them get to a better place. And I'd done that in so many different situations over the course of my lifetime. This was second nature to me. This was unconscious competence. It wasn't something I had to think about. Didn't have to write a script. And so that was, that's just another one of those situations. And, we had this great, I said, can I give you a hug? And she goes, yes, please. And so I gave her a hug, and we, we parted ways. And, I was there for 3 days. And the next night I was out there, and I was at another cross where they were crossing, and they said there was a gentleman standing there, and he's just looking at this picture, and he has a can of beer, and he sets it down next to this cross. And I said, wow. So I looked at him and I said, how did you know him? And he goes, I didn't. He said, I'm a fireman. He goes, I was off duty that night. And I was at the concert, just enjoying the concert, and the shots rang out, and he fell in my arms. And I started CPR and first aid. And I just looked at him. And then he kind of breathed a little bit, and I said, man, if I was to be in that situation, I would pray that somebody with your skill set would be the one that I would fall into their arms, to know that my greatest chance of survival was in good hands. And he and I we both were just weeping, and we just had this great conversation. And because he says, yeah, there was just nothing I could do. And I said, well, like I said, you were his best chance of survival. I think you did everything. And he went, And I think it's in those moments that you just begin to realize, one, things are so much more important than the things we're making important. And, we'll talk a little bit about my story, about my daughter and my brother, and, some other people that I've been a part of their tragedy. But I think the biggest thing is for me was to realize that we have a part that we can play, but we have to move to make that happen.
Well, we're going to emphasize that. But that's, my brain's swimming in a lot of different directions right now, but I think a big learning or a takeaway that I can get, and maybe other people can, from that specific story, is that sometimes you want to say the right thing because you see somebody that, whether you know them or don't know them, that they're hurting, and so you want to say something and you feel like that. But sometimes it's not about what you say, it's just like you being present, being there, just being. So that's...
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because people say, Bob, I don't know what to say. If I went to that, what would I say? And I go, you don't have to say anything. Just be. And they're like, yeah, but I don't know that I could say anything that would be comfortable. I said, probably not. One of the pillars that I have in Next Level is that stop trying to make sense of senseless behavior. People, but how do you make sense of that shooting in Vegas? How do you make sense of this thing? And I go, stop trying to make sense of a senseless behavior. You don't have to make sense of it, but you can still love on someone. You can still encourage someone. You can still support someone. You can still be there without having to make sense of it. And I think, one of those things for me was just realizing that my role is not to solve the problem. My role is to be there for those that are wanting to solve their problem.
That's just be there.
and asking better questions. One of the things is that the quality of your connection will be determined by the quality of questions you ask. So so when I walk up to that guy and I could say, "Oh man, I'm so sorry for your loss." That's a statement. Statements are okay sometimes, but by and large, if you really want to help someone, ask better questions. Help them learn to ask better questions. So when I said, "How well did you know her?" And she goes, "She was my best friend in high school." A good question begets a better question. So once I asked that question and she says, "My best friend in high school," I said, "Can you tell me a favorite memory of yours? Can you tell me something?" "Oh, yeah." And then she opens her phone up and then she starts going. That better question opened the door to make even a better connection. And in doing so, that's where the bond became. And I didn't solve it. I didn't bring her friend back. I didn't make her feel any better. All I did was help her look at things a little bit differently and remember the fond memories that she had of this amazing young lady.
Yeah, I can totally imagine that situation happening, and then different situations in my life where, people have been in situations that were just horrible and that you want to help, but just knowing that it's not about, it's first being present, right? And again, reiterating that, and then like what you said, asking better questions, but the better question begets a better question. That's next level right there. For me, I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, I mean, what I equate is a lot of people, what they're trying to do is they're asking a question out of sequence. So if I were to walk up to a woman on the street and say, "Hey, would you like to have sex?" I'm going to get slapped, and rightly so. But if I walk up and I say, "Hey, how long have you been living in this area?" And she says something, and I say, "Well, what brought you to this area?" And she can expand. I moved here I met a man, I moved here, and we got married. "Oh, you've been married, so how long have you been married?" 10 years. If I just walked up to the stranger on the street and said, "Hey, how long have you been married?" She'd be like, "Why are you asking me, and how do you even know I'm married?" But so sequence does matter. If I give you 7 random digits and say, "Here's my phone number, 949-542-6398, you will call it on the very first time. But if I just give you 7 numbers and go, "They're out of sequence, go ahead, try and call me," good luck. Sequence matters. And unfortunately, when we're trying to build a connection with someone, more often than not, we're asking the wrong question in the wrong sequence, and that's why we're getting the word "no" as the answer.
Makes a lot of sense.
Sales teams on that principle alone, just asking better questions and getting them in the right sequence.
So you have also worked with sales teams.
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of direct sales organizations, with a lot of sales organizations from every kind of industry that you can imagine, from construction to insurance to financial services, you name it. Very blessed.
Well, I think it's an important thing for everyone, not only because if you're selling something, it's a product, you want to make sure that you're able to sell it, and for them, they're able to understand it. So they don't ask the right questions and lead them down the right, in sequence, like you said, then most likely they're not going to make a sale. Or if they do, it's probably because of a high pressure, and then that client doesn't fully understand, and then they're most likely going to ask for a refund or whatever. So I think it's a very important process.
Absolutely.
Oh, so a little bit about some of the things you mentioned, about your brother, and then I know there's other things, but can you allude to or maybe talk about some of the situations in your life that have really been a struggle with some kind of adversity? And
yeah, I mean, we've all got struggles. So when I share some of my issues, some of my struggles, some of my adversity, it's never to minimize or to take anything away from anyone else. I believe that we all have paid a price to be who we are today. And what I do a talk called Price Paid. My mom died when I was in high school. A father figure of mine, a family friend, a father figure of mine died of a drug overdose. Um, my daughter got killed in a car accident that I witnessed. I was driving behind them when the car had an accident, and so I witnessed it, pulled her out, breathed for her until paramedics got there. She was 3. Her name was Macy. My oldest brother, who was 10 years older than me, committed suicide. And then most recently, I had lost a granddaughter who was 2 months old, and she died of SIDS before I got a chance to meet her. So I've been a child losing a parent losing a child, sibling losing a sibling, and a grandparent losing a grandchild. And I don't share that to get people to go, oh my gosh, I can't believe what he went through. Hey, look, my stuff that I went through was designed for me. You've gone through stuff, and you and I've talked a little bit. You've gone through stuff. Everyone listening has gone through stuff. It's not to make one worse than the other. It is. It's different. And I was equipped with some great people in my life that helped me manage some of those situations better. But they all come with a price. And I think that's, one of the things I would say, there's a great Bible verse that says the rain falls on the just and the unjust. It doesn't matter how good looking you are, what kind of car you drive, what kind of house you live in, how much money you have in the bank account. We all have stuff that can take us out in a moment's notice. If we're not careful, we don't build that stage.
I remember when we were in the hospital with Sage and he had all the different surgeries, and I mean, I like read, what is it, laser photo something, eye surgery where they burn the retinas, and then he had heart surgery, and then he had intestinal perforations and all different kinds of crazy things, and then he'd be like, I think it was on his 5th or 6th surgery. And then I remember a couple parents coming in, and their kid had to be put under, it's called a bilirubin light, and that's to help fight against jaundice. When the skin turns yellow and the liver's issue, it's a liver issue. But they put them under that bilirubin light, and I remember that couple coming in, and they were scared shitless. They were afraid. They were like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And now at that point, and I'm looking at them had gone through all of this stuff. I wish that it was just a bilirubin light, right? How amazing that would have been. But that's not what was happening in their eyes. In their eyes, it was just as bad as that 5th or 6th surgery, or that aspiration pneumonia, whatever it was that Sage was dealing with. It's that bad. And so I had this realization at that point that it wasn't how bad the actual problem was. It was because the worst problem is the one you're facing at the moment. Whether it's a stub your toe or it's a, whatever it is, that problem that you're dealing with at the moment. And so what you're talking about, and then each person, we all have our own payment that we have to pay, I guess, to be here, but it's just as bad. I mean, but dang, when you put yours, when you list it like that, and it just makes your mind wonder that's, you have not been a stranger to adversity. Now, my question to that is, what do you say to yourself, or how do you justify or reconcile when you are facing a situation that should never happen? You should never have, right? It's easy for me to say, but people do say that. Like, a parent should never lose their child. And I'm, I have 2 daughters. One's 25 and the other one is 9. And just, I mean, I can only imagine. So you should have never had to do that. You should have never experienced that. How do you reconcile that in your mind?
I think the first thing is I have to recognize that there's a purpose in it, even though if I don't know what it is. When we start looking for the purpose, then it can become evident. But until we start looking for it, it's going to be hard for it to be evident. Man's Search for Meaning, the book by Dr. Viktor Frankl, one of my favorite books of all times, because do you look for the meaning in what you're going through? Yeah, I look for the meaning. I may not like it. I may not be happy with it. I may not be comfortable with it. But if I look for the meaning, then I can find something to do with it. With my daughter, when she died, we made a decision to donate 3 of her organs, and those 3 people are still alive, to the best of my knowledge, still alive today. You look at, say, okay, and next thing is reframing it. I remember when I was living in my car and I'm thinking, how am I going to deal with this? My daughter just died. My relationship is over. I feel like just giving up. I lost everything I owned, was literally living in my car. And I remember thinking, what do I do with this? And we donated organs, so I had some solace in that, I guess. Didn't really change, didn't bring my daughter back, didn't make me feel loved anymore. Just gave me something to look at. And I remember thinking, how would I reframe this in my head so that I could get a benefit out of this? And I thought, well, she's now in heaven. My mom died when I was in high school. So I started thinking, Macy is my first grandchild fathered by me that my mom got to hold in heaven. Whew, that's a powerful statement. So, okay, does it bring her back? No. Does it make me feel better that she's dead? No. But it gives me something to look beyond the moment. And that's that vision, right? Without a vision, people perish. The vision is that this is what's happening in heaven. So then I anchor that by saying, okay, so here she is entering in heaven. My mom's sitting on a chair, and my mom says, come here, Macy. I've got some stories to tell you about your daddy. And so then I think, well, okay, that's kind of an interesting thought. And I go, what would the stories be? What would be the first 3 stories that my mom would share with her? So I recounted the 3 stories I think my mom would share first. Every time that I had a consequence or a feeling of despair because of my daughter's death, I would go back and I'd say, entering in heaven, crawling up on mom's lap, mom recounting 3 stories, and I would play that tape until my emotion changed. Then I would move to the next thing. And I think so. First thing is really to recognize what's really happening, to reframe that was really key. And then I think that the third piece was to really support myself by doing something for someone else. I would say I would allow myself to feel whatever I was feeling. I might be depressed. I might be angry. I might be bitter. But I allowed myself to feel that for a set period of time. I would say, this I'm going to allow for 20 minutes. This I'm going to allow for an hour, whatever it was. And I would do that. And then I would say, and as soon as that hour, that 20 minutes is up, I'm going to go do something for someone else. My eyes are no longer going to be on me. They're going to go put it on someone else. So I'd go take my neighbor's trash cans in. I'd drive to Walmart and help somebody carry stuff out. Whatever I could do to get my mind off of me and put it on someone else. And I found that allowed me to move through those situations quicker and more beneficially to myself as well as others. So I think that 3-step process was really beneficial for me.
So my experience is that there's also another emotion that people deal with whenever they lose somebody, and that's guilt. Like, and my question is, and what I've seen in the grieving process, I've had my fair share, and I've had my fair share of conversations with people that are in the process, and And what I found is that sometimes they feel like them breaking down and crying and overly expressing suffering is their way of paying homage and honoring who they have lost. And because of that, it's like they're putting themselves on a cross in order to honor the person who they lost. And have you seen, or have you talked to, or do you have an answer for somebody that is just beside themselves and they're crying and they just because and have you seen that situation ever?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think everyone handles grief differently, right? And everyone handles grief differently at different times. So just because they handled it one time in this way doesn't mean it's going to work that way every time that they approach grief in a different fashion, or even that same grief. So I think the first acknowledgement is to recognize what it really is. You know, Tony Robbins talks about know what it is, not better than it is, not worse than it is, but exactly what it is. And I think that's one of the first things to go, what am I really dealing with here? Am I dealing with guilt? Because that's different than dealing with sorrow, dealing with despair, or different dealing with anger. What are you really dealing with? What is your real emotion tied to? And then saying, okay, what would be the best way for me to utilize this to get to my next level, whatever that is? Get through this period, get through this one moment, get through this hour, this next week, this next month, this next year. Acknowledge what it really is, determine a course of action. Maybe it's just to alleviate the guilt. And, you know, for those of us that have dealt with guilt, I remember tucking my daughter into the car seat, buckling it, getting in my other car, and on the way home, that my daughter's car is she crashes and she dies. There was a lot of guilt with that. Why didn't you just take her in your own car? Why did you let her go with her mom? Why did you not take her? Well, you could have still had her. That wasn't the point. The point wasn't to decide what I could have done. The point was to decide what did happen and what I did do, and then what I was going to do with that. So what happened? How am I going to utilize that to benefit myself and others? And then what course of action am I going to take first? And the first one was, I was going to make sure that I got some help, whether it was therapy or people that I knew surrounding myself. I'm a big one on the power of association. So, you know, Jim Rohn said you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most amount of your time with. I really was focused on making sure that my nucleus of people around me were a hedge, that they were a hedge to safeguard me from doing something stupid that could have easily happened, or for going into a hole that I couldn't get out of. So the power of association was probably my final step that helped.
Man, I have somebody very close to me who I have a tremendous amount of respect for that called me and they lost their kid. She was pregnant and went into labor very, very early, and they have been wanting to have a kid for a long time. Their first kid. Finally, they get pregnant. Everybody's over the moon. And 20 weeks old. And so she went into labor. He ended up actually delivering and catching his son. And so the doctor got there and said, hey, you did good doing this, but at this point, you're only doing damage because there's, the lungs aren't developed yet, and so you're gonna have to let him go. And so for an hour is about how long it took, and they had to be there, and with him in the process. And so I got a call. It was about at midnight when this conversation happened. And so you want to, especially for somebody that is close to you, you want to have the right advice. But sometimes, and again, like we talked about earlier, there's no such thing. And so, I guess there's a ton of emotions to unpack in that situation. And so, and I'm sure everything, guilt and anger and sadness and helplessness. And so it's, have you ever dealt with somebody that has been in a similar situation to that?
Yeah, I've dealt with people that have lost somebody to suicide within the last hour. I've dealt with people who have had miscarriages. I've dealt with people that have dealt with every kind of thing you can imagine. The first thing that I know is that the best thing is to realize that you don't have to have an answer. You just don't. To help someone else, I think one of the best things we can do is to say, I have no words for you. I don't even know what to say, except that I'm sorry that you're going through this. If somebody approached me that way during my daughter's death or during my brother's suicide, that would be all I would ask for, rather than them try and come up with something or come up with a little pithy cliche. That didn't do me any good. People say, oh, he's in a better place now. She's in a better place now. I can tell you what finger I would hold up to that. Doesn't mean crap to me in that moment, because I'm still missing my daughter. I'm still missing my brother. But if somebody came up and said, man, Bob, I do not know. I don't even know what to say. I'll give you a great example. Garth Brooks is one of my all-time favorite performers ever. And I remember his song called The Dance. And the chorus says, yes, my life is better left to chance. I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance. And it's about all these things, could be different, but you'd have to miss the dance in order to get that other outcome. And I remember when my daughter died, I wrote that on the back of a business card. I actually typed it out on the back of a business card. And I said, yes, my life is better left to chance. I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance. Macy, you're the one dance I would never wish to miss, no matter how short the song was. And I thought, I'm going to carry this around until one day I'm going to bump into Garth somewhere and I'm going to give this to him. And everyone's like, Bob, you've worked with all these different people. Why don't you just, know how to get a hold of them? I'm like, that's not about that. It's just going to happen. And so I had gone to several different award shows. I had been worked with a lot of different famous people. And everything I had been that I thought he might have been at, he wasn't there. Well, I don't know. I don't know how to explain that, but okay. And then one day, a friend of mine, Robbie Horowitz, calls me up and he goes, hey, Bob, could you come over to Vegas and help me with this event? And what do you need me to do? He goes, I just need you to, take some guys out golfing, take some guys out, clubbing and stuff. And these are celebrities. And could you just kind of be with them and then make sure that they're on their marks when they need to be on camera? I'm like, sure, I'll do that. So I had a great time. But this one was a WB Music Awards, and I was at the back, and it was day of rehearsal. I was at I think it was at the Mandalay Bay, And it was day of rehearsal, and I'm standing back there, and all of a sudden I hear this over the loudspeaker, Mr. Garth Brooks, please come to the stage for rehearsal. And I'm like, I didn't even know he was going to be here. I mean, WB Music Awards, not a country music award. It's not, well, this is odd. So I walked up. This is the best. Oh my gosh. Garth taught me so much in this one encounter, and I've had a few encounters with him. But this was an amazing encounter. I walked up to him as he was coming down the risers off the stage, and I said, hey, Garth, can I have a minute? I want to share something with you. And he goes, sure. So he's standing on the steps coming down, and I'm right below him. And I just turned to him and I handed him the card because I've been carrying it around for a couple of years. And he looks at the card and he does just like this, Scotty. He goes, we need to talk. And I said, yes, sir, we do. We spent the next 45 minutes. Everyone's going on rehearsal, the PA is going and people are trying and doing all these different things. Lighting's changing, mics are changing. And Garth was like this with me for 45 minutes. Bob, how old was she? She was 3. Bob, what? Does she have any brothers and sisters? Yeah, she has. How old are they? Told him. For 45 minutes, he asked me questions that nobody else was asking. Everyone wanted to know how she died. That's a standard question. But he asked me even better questions, quality of your questions, but determine the quality of connection. He asked me this question, Scotty, Bob, did they ever ask about her? Her siblings? Yeah. What do you say to them? Nobody had ever asked me that before. I'm like, I tell him, that she's in heaven and, I do the best I can. He goes, puts his hand on my shoulder, and I remember him looking at me and he goes, Bob, I've got 3 girls. Man, I hope I never, ever have to have that conversation. I said, I hope you don't either, Garth. We had 45 minutes of this conversation, and I walked away going, the thing I learned most was Garth did not hear anything that was happening around us. His eyes never left my eyes. He never looked around to see what else was going on. He made me feel like I was the only person in the world. That's brilliance. That's presence. That's an amazing man. I remember crying, and I'm like, Garth, I am really sorry. I deal with celebrities a lot. I don't have this issue. And I remember his comment, I can't remember exactly, but his words were basically, Bob, this isn't about celebrity. This is about 2 men having a conversation. And I've had the chance to talk to him about that before or after that. And I walk away going, that's what life's about. Having real, honest conversations with real, honest people that aren't trying to hide, trying to posture, trying to make it look like something it's not, but are just willing to say, here's what it really is. And I've had some amazing opportunities like that. But I remember that being one of those that if I could teach anyone anything, it would be the ability to be present and to shut up long enough to hear what's really being said.
I mean, that alone is the podcast. We don't have to talk about another damn thing, dude. This is the value of this podcast so far. Just from, I mean, I just thank you for that story. That's pretty awesome.
Thank you for that.
So I also didn't know that you had dealt with a lot of celebrities too, and so that's another whole set of questions. But back, one more thing I just wanted to kind of understand with your brother and when he committed suicide, what the situation around that? What was the problem? What happened?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question, and unfortunately, it's a multifaceted, multi-layered answer. I don't believe that there's typically one thing. What I talk about with your Mastering Your Inner Game, which is the book I wrote, Mastering your inner game must be strong enough to support the actions required for the results you desire. So I think over a period of time, certain layers get worn down to the point where either you're no longer capable of handling that, or you're no longer willing to deal with it. My brother, amazing guy, probably one of the greatest influences in my life. He was, he had been a master salesperson. I mean, professional salesperson, probably one of the best salespeople I ever met in my life. And he had such influence over me that he was 10 years older than me. And I looked at him probably in a lot of ways as a father figure as well as my brother. And he had gotten recently married again, remarried, and he had had some pain in his back, and he was dealing with a lot of pain. His suicide letter to me was stating that was the reason he was taking his life. Well, I know that he'd had that pain for 10 years. So why was it affecting him in such a way now where it hadn't for the last 10 years? I think that his inner game had gotten to the point where it could handle this, but it couldn't handle that. When his new wife, that they'd been married for a few years at that point, his back pain was really bad, but he was functioning. But then he lost his job, but he was still functioning. Then he didn't have the money to pay the bills, so he moves his wife into her sister's house and is away from her because he doesn't want to live with her sister. But that takes another toll. That's a whole other rung on the ladder for him. Now he's living in a motel, which he knows he's taking money from his wife to support a motel because he doesn't want to live with his sister-in-law. That's another rung on the ladder. And over the course of every month, it was like, okay, next month's going to be different. Next month's going to be different. Without a vision, people perish. The vision that is going to get better depleted to the point where he didn't really realize it was going to get any better. And at that point, I think that's when suicide happens. People say, Bob, how do you know when somebody's going to commit suicide? You don't. The unfortunate part is you don't until they do it. And I get interviewed on a lot of radio shows, and they'll ask me that's one of the best. How can I tell? You can't. Because the rung on the ladder may be 20 steps down. You may not know until it's there. With my brother, we had a conversation 3 nights before he committed suicide. We were going to watch the Denver Bronco game. We're both big Denver Bronco fans. I say, hey, it's Monday Night Football. You want to watch football? He goes, no, I'm going to stay. I'm staying tonight. I said, well, I'll come over and watch. No, just not feeling up to it. My back's hurting. I just want to lay down. I'm just going to go to bed early. Okay. Well, a few nights later, he's gone. What was it? I don't know. Can't tell you exactly what. I can tell you that the depreciating value of his life over the course of time, and with most men, most people included, anybody, the value of their life, they want to be significant, right? Significance is one of the 6 human needs. And he probably wasn't feeling very significant. He wasn't supporting his wife the way he wanted to support her. He wasn't supporting his kids. He wasn't able to do these things. And so at some point, it just became inevitable. One of the next level pillars I teach is whatever becomes acceptable becomes inevitable. And so think about what became acceptable to him. I'm probably not doing everything that I need to do, and I'm not sure that it will ever change now. So in his letter, that was why he took his life.
I definitely can relate. And when my dad passed away, I feel like guilt is the most powerful silent killer, and people don't specifically talk about it. But when you're with yourself and your thoughts, and you're bringing back up the past and your memories, and then you're thinking about how you could have impacted those that you love, but you didn't, and that now you're in this situation and you're looking back and you can't change the past and where you could have been, and then you've missed these moments of life, of connection, of being somebody of support to the people that you love, that which ties into significance, and that you basically missed the boat, not because you had to, it was because of choices that you made. And that guilt, I feel like, with my own family, right? And I've always been as active as I can be with my kids. They all live here, and they have been always, and I've been divorced, and right now I'm so thankful for my wife. I've been with her for about 16 years, and what a difference a good woman makes. Unless you're gay, a good man, whatever it is, but whatever it is, what a difference a good person makes in everything. And so thank God I have my wife right now. But I just, even still, being active and proactive and doing things and having love, and like, I still feel guilt, like, man, I need to be more present. I've been working too much. I've been, and I haven't had any major addictions, right? I've had my fair share of shit that I shouldn't have done. But the addictions and the, taking pills and drinking and these kind of things that take you out of presence of mind and take you out of the connection that you have with each other, with your loved ones. And then when you have to reconcile that, when you're by yourself, when you're, again, I've had more conversations than probably most people with people in that space. And so I have experienced it, but I also know that people that have gone farther with addiction and out of their loved ones, when they are sitting with themselves, that's a very tall order. That's a very heavy blanket that sometimes suffocates them. So,
yeah. The only thing I would add to that is, and not to usurp what you said, I think guilt is one of the most brutal things that people can deal with, if they deal with it. The other one is shame. Guilt and shame, man, I really believe that guilt and shame are probably at the crux of most mental illness. They just haven't learned how to deal with something, and they're feeling guilty or they're feeling shameful about it. And one of those things, one by itself, can make somebody crumble to their knees. Both of them, man, it's a recipe for misery. And I think, yeah. I agree with what you said. And I appreciate what you said, because it's so true. It's very sad to watch somebody deal with guilt and shame, and being unwilling to do something to help it, because that at the end of guilt and shame is a very sad life, and or no life at all.
So that leads me to another thought that I just wanted to maybe explore, and that I feel like everything is a different side of the same coin. Guilt, and then on the other side of guilt, I'm just trying to think. So like love and hate, and war and peace, right? And shame, I guess, would be maybe pride or being proud. That if somebody is in a situation where they're feeling shame or guilt, that all of these emotions that we feel are temporary. They're fleeting. By it's energy and motion, right? So emotion is here today, gone tomorrow. And yes, sometimes they're here longer than not, right? Especially guilt, because every time you think of it, it's like a trigger, right? It takes you back to that same emotion. But if you're able to take yourself out for a second and look down at yourself experiencing this emotion, you can probably see that you have that emotion that is creating an impression in your soul. I mean, I'm just thinking, this is kind of how I'm like visualizing it, that when you have guilt, it is affecting you. It is making an impact on your soul, on your heart. But once you get past that negative reaction, that negative feeling that it's causing, the impression that was made from the guilt has now created more space for a deeper level of pride, a deeper level of connection, a deeper level of satisfaction, because without having to suffer through that experience, you would have never been able to have the discernment and the capacity to really enjoy the fullness of, and then I think it comes to the human condition where it's like we have to experience these situations, these emotions on a negative side, because that negative side is what's creating the space for, on the positive side, for your cup to be overfilled, you know? So I feel like every negative emotion that you're having is also connected by a positive emotion, but it's just a set of time and perspective that you need in order to get to that other side.
Yeah, I agree. I you know what I call those underlying currents. We all have underlying currents going on. And we go, why did I do that? I would have never done that. No, you wouldn't have, but the circumstances weren't the same as they've always been. And that's why you did it. You were feeling sad, you were feeling depressed, and then you started making decisions from that state of mind or that state of being, and that emotional undercurrent that was going on affected your decision making. You would have never done that before, but you did now. So I think that's it's those underlying currents that are always at play. They're always you know, if you go out to the ocean and you're not paying attention from the beach, you'll end up moving down to another lifeguard tower or another city in some places. If you're just not paying attention to what the underlying current is doing, it's moving you even though you don't recognize it until it could be too late.
Do you feel like everything is a I guess the opposites are, I guess that's where I'm trying to maybe I'm not, as far as articulating the way that I'm looking at. In my mind, I see people out, I imagine people out there that are suffering in some kind of a life situation, right? And they're dealing with guilt. Maybe this is what brought it up, because of guilt, because I'm imagining my dad. I'm imagining other people that I've had these conversations with that have made bad choices, and they're reconciling it, and they're being weighed down, and they are contemplating suicide. They are looking at ending it because that is an easier solution than to continue to deal with that heavy blanket, right? It's like you're suffocating and you have no way out. So you are like, just, it's easier to pull a trigger and be done with this. And yes, it's scary, but I can't fathom the ongoing weight of what I'm dealing with. So I'm just going to end it. But what I'm seeing, I guess the message that I feel like I need to get out based on our conversation is that when you do feel that, it is only prepping you, because on the other side of that direct influence, that negative, that guilt feels, that guilt is weighing on you, is literally preparing you for a level of discernment and life feeling that you could have never experienced unless you sort out that guilt and you put it in its place. But if you don't, yes, you end it, it's gone, right? But the point of what's happening inside of you is not a punishment, but a process. That there is a process that you have to go through, like the coal to the diamond, right? If that is the actual, I've heard that's not actually how diamonds are formed, but whatever, the idea is the same, that from coal to a diamond by pressure, and that if you're feeling that weight of guilt or weight of shame, that it's molding what your life is potentially going to be, which is the exact opposite of how bad you feel. It's all in relation to intensity. So it's whatever intensity that you feel in guilt or in sorrow or in shame, or is directly related to the positive feeling that you're going to feel of love or of pride or of connection.
Yeah, I definitely I agree with all of those sentiments. I think, when I talk about price paid, it's like most people, they don't consider what they're going through as an investment. They consider it as an expense. The difference between an investment and an expense is, an investment, you expect a return on it. An expense, you don't. Most people have gone through their life looking at life as an expense. Yep, okay, that's what it cost me. That's what it cost me. That's what it cost me. Versus I've just flipped the script and said, that's the investment I made. What's my return?
That's a good way to put it. That's way easier than what I said. But yes, absolutely. You're not, it's the victim mentality compared to not the victim mentality,
Yeah. Like, for example, unfulfilled expectations lead to anger, bitterness, resentment, frustration, and overwhelm. That's one of the next level pillars that I teach. So if you look at that and you're feeling any one of those emotions or more, all you have to do is say, what was I expecting to be different that's not? I'm mad that my spouse cheated on me. Are you really mad that your spouse cheated on you, or are you mad that you had an expectation that they never would, and then they did? That's what you're really mad about, is the expectation that they never would, but they did. You're mad that, you're upset, you're frustrated, you're overwhelmed because of whatever it is. Just say, what was I expecting to be different that's not? And then you can go back and correct what didn't happen. Then you can say, here's what, but again, it's that expectation. When we look at an expense, when we look at an event that we went through in our life, and we look at it as an expense, we're not expecting anything in it as a return. I always look and say, what is the return on this? I've already paid it. How many of you would buy a house, spend 30 years paying it off, and keep making a payment on it? Nobody. Why? Because you would want to have owned it. And the only way you can do that is to know that you've made the investment, you've paid the price, and now it's yours. And when you have an investment, then you can say, I expect this return. So my daughter dying, I have an expense. It's not an expense. It's an investment that happened. And now I'm expending. What's my return on that investment? My return on that investment is that I can deal and relate to people who've lost children that I could never have been able to relate to them have I not lost my child. I've helped 3 people stay alive many years later that would have been dead otherwise, because of my daughter's death. Not because I'm a great person, not because it was a decision that I made to do. It was because that was the investment that I wanted to make sure it was an investment that had a return. And I think that's one of the key things is when we go through something, what's the acknowledgement? It's an acknowledgement, it's an expense, and we have no expectation of anything beyond that, or it's an investment and we expect a return.
It's good life advice, man. I that alone, there are a lot of people. I think just, again, I feel like there's been a lot of nuggets of good information in talking to you. So you're definitely full of insights. But that's some really good advice.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Trying to accomplish as far as what would you like to see a result of this podcast, as far as maybe connecting to people or making an impact, or, I guess, what's your life's goal? I say podcast, but let me be more broad than that. What are you trying to accomplish in life at this point, at this juncture?
My mission in life has been for many years now to impart vision, because without a vision, people perish, to impart vision and inspire strategic action. Going back to your mission of move. The Bible even talks about, faith without works is dead being alone. You can have the faith, but if you don't do something with it, it's dead. So just having faith doesn't mean it's going to change. We're going to have to do something with that faith. It's going to require movement. It's going to require action. So inspire strategic action. Impart vision, inspire strategic action.
Are you active in a church?
No, I'm not really active in a particular church. There's one that we go to sometimes, but not every week.
Do you have a process of, do you pray at certain times? Do you have something that you do with your spiritual side?
I might have a quiet time in the morning that might be, I have a playlist of devotional music that I absolutely love. And I might have that playlist in my YouTube, and I'll play those videos, play that music. I believe in having a playlist for everything. So I have a playlist that puts me in pensive moods to be able to think more clearly. I have a playlist that inspires me. I have a playlist that inspires me that includes videos like Ronald Reagan saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Or Martin Luther King, "I have a dream." Or Robert F. Kennedy or John F. Kennedy, I'm saying these different things that I know move me emotionally, because sometimes in life we're going to have to require more emotion from ourselves than others. That emotional currency has to be available to spend at will. And so I have videos, I have music that moves me emotionally and inspires me, or makes me think more clearly, or makes me more grateful and appreciative. And it might be a video, it might be an audio. But I think that those playlists, having them ready in a moment's notice, because we know that things are going to happen in life that are unplanned. I don't have to go looking for some inspirational music. I can just go to my playlist and go, inspire. And I can play 20 different songs, 20 different videos that inspire me, and I have them at a moment's notice.
I read the book, Charles Darwin has a book that is the expression of emotion in man and animals. And that, to me, the first time I read it or listened to it, I always listen to these books, is that it gave me the understanding that emotions are a survival mechanism. It's literally, and before that, I hadn't really looked at it in that context, that your emotions are there to help propel you into the future so that you can live, you can survive, And so when you look at it in that way, and then you have these different lists that will help that particular emotion, and that emotion, it's like you've developed your strategy for that particular challenge that you're up against or whatever you're trying to accomplish at that point. That's not a bad thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, if I'm going to run a around the block, it's going to require a different mindset, a different approach than running a 26-mile marathon. So if I'm going to run a marathon with the mindset and the stamina of running a sprint, I'm going to lose. I have to change my emotional currency to be able to spend what I need to spend in order to make that outcome.
That makes sense. I remember the first time I experienced that, because I've wrestled since 5th grade, and I have a big back.
Oh, I wrestled since 3rd.
Wow. Oh, no kidding. I knew that we had more in common, man. Like, we're kind of on a very similar path and similar perspective, it seems like. I ended up also, so part of my joining the military is I had a used car salesman as a recruiter, Fast Eddie, and he's like, "Oh, all Army wrestling, you can go here, we can do this, we can all Army wrestling, plus all of these cool, you get to shoot the weapons, you get to go the obstacle courses," and it was like, "Oh, you get to go to Germany." And then at that point, my brother had he was in Germany, so partying and girls and all that stuff, and I was like, "Oh, I don't need to go to college. I'm going to go to the Army. And then after I go there, I'm going to wrestle, and then I'm going to go to college." And then, well, they sent me to Georgia to a post that instead of going to Germany, and the post did not have a wrestling team. And so it was, but then afterwards, I ended up going to college, and then I wrestled in college, and I got 5th or 4th in the nation. So I became All-American wrestler. And, but the first time, so it's been a lot of what has, I guess, given me my life experience. But the very first time, I was in 5th grade, and we had just finished wrestling, and we were walking from the wrestling room to the locker room, and my buddy Jeff had a Walkman, and he was playing Eye of the Tiger. And then he's like, "Oh, let's run." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Oh, you got to listen to this." And so I put the headphones on, and then he push play, and I'm like, "Yeah, let's run," and it totally, and then I always listen to that before my matches, because it would get me into that frame of mind where it was like, oh, so
yeah,
using it in other contexts too, relaxing, studying, focusing.
Yeah. I use it, before I go up on stage, before I go to speak, before I do a podcast. I'll play certain music that'll put me in a certain state before I do that next thing.
That's awesome, man. Well, so the last thing I wanted to talk about before we, cut it, is that your group, how is it that you help with people? I know you said, okay, so all things next level, but I've seen it next level by association, right? Is that just a project that you do, or is there, like, when people, if somebody listening to this wants to learn more from you, what kind of things do you offer, and how, I guess start with that.
Well, Next Level by Association started in 2010. I was speaking before a group in an office, and I was mentioning some of these people that have influenced me over the course of my life. 2010, I noticed it's pausing sometimes. That I was speaking about these different people that had influenced me over my life, and people like Keith Ferrazzi, who wrote Never Eat Alone, Who's Got Your Back, people like Les Brown, people like Tommy Baylor, all these different people that I've known over the course of my life that had inspired me and had challenged me, and I said, who would if I was going to hold a dinner once a month and invite some of these people I've mentioned to come have dinner with us, and not for them to come speak, but for them to come and have dinner with us, and so you can kind of be a part of a conversation. How many of you guys would join? And almost everyone raised their hand. I said, okay, but there's going to be a cost. It's going to be $200 a month. Minimum 12 months, so that we're not having people just jump in and jump out based on the speaker. But, be a part of a community. And we still had people. I said, okay, so let's start it. So I started it just based on that conversation in front of an audience. And we started 13 years ago. And we did that until COVID. And then we couldn't meet. So we had to switch everything to online. So we still meet online. And every now and then we'll do a pop-up where we can gather and get together. But, we've reduced it down to $100 a month. But we always do it on the third Thursday of every month. We do it online. And so we don't have dinners unless we're doing a pop-up. But we still gather together online. And I'll bring in a guest of honor. I've had Mark Victor Hansen. I've had Tommy Baylor, who wrote She's Out of My Life and co-produced We Are the World. We've had different Lee Steinberg, the famed sports agent from Jerry Maguire. And we've had just some amazing people these are friends of mine that come. They don't get paid to come. The founder of Make-A-Wish Foundation. They don't get paid to come. They come because they want to be part of, and they share their story. And then there's live Q&A, and people can actually develop relationship currency with those people. So it's been kind of, for 13 years, it's been really a fun experiment that has really turned into helping a lot of people create different lives than they were living before. Different connections.
Ship currency. That's the first time I've heard that one.
Yeah. We have to have the right level of relationship currency. Otherwise, the answer is always no.
That makes sense. Now, do you also, whether it's the Next Level by Association or do you do sessions where you'll meet with people one-on-one, or do you do group sessions, or how is it that you're...
Yeah, I have a weekly group coaching that I offer for $50 a month. It used to be $100. When COVID, I reduced it down to $50 so that it could help more people during that, and we just never raised it back up yet. Not to say that we won't, but people can hop on the call. It's a Zoom call. People can hop on. They can ask their question, personal or professional, and I'll give laser-focused coaching. It's a laser-focused. We don't go into the story. Most people spend far too much time on their story already. We just go into solution-oriented coaching. And then, so we do that. And then I do some one-on-one, but one-on-one is typically at $2,500 for 4 hours. And it's not for everyone. I don't want everyone in a one-on-one coaching. I believe that the group coaching is probably one of the most beneficial things people can participate in, because they get to hear what other people are going through and what the solutions are for them, and then they can apply it to their own lives. So the group coaching is a great process to help people really move.
Yeah, I feel like that's very, very affordable.
Yeah. Some people call it the cheapest level of insurance they've ever had.
I can see that. And then if somebody's doing, and who is typically the person that would be doing the $2,500 for 4 hours?
I've had everyone. I mean, it's so funny because I thought it would be executives. It's turned into be moms, dads. It's turned into be doctors, lawyers. It's turned into be people who are addicted with addictions, to people who are just saying, I just want to elevate my game. I just want to be better. I've had professional athletes in there. I've had celebrities.
Wow.
And then I have a video series called Mastering Your Inner Game, which is taken from my book. I have my books.
First, that people can purchase, or?
Yeah, they can go to the website, everythingnextlevel.com, and go into courses, and they can, Mastering Your Inner Game is an online video series, so they can actually watch the videos at their leisure, have access to the group, and so they can do it right there It's I think one of the best things. I've had people that have used it, from returning war veterans to people with terminal illnesses to people dealing with struggles in personal and professional. And mastering your inner game is probably my foundation piece to help anyone. If you go through that, you qualify to move to other things, because I think that in mastering your inner game, that's the foundation piece for most people. They've never done the work on themselves, and they've never managed what that inner game is. They just think, oh, I just need to change my mindset. Mindset's about 10% of your inner game. Your inner game is everything that makes you up who you are today, personally and professionally, good, bad, ugly, everything.
And then that is a course that if they go online, they can, or is it a membership or?
No, they can buy the 7 videos. It's a downloadable video. So, I mean, online videos, so they can watch them anytime they want from wherever they're at. And it's $197. And I'll give them a half hour of coaching with that one-on-one to help them kind of integrate it.
Very cool. And then the $50, is that a ongoing month? It's per, you said
12-month commitment. 12-month commitment. And the reason I do everything with 12-month commitment is because I want people to get the benefit of having a community. And community is not formed by somebody being there 1 month and not being there the next month, or being committed for 1 month and not being there, then committed the next month. So it is a 12-month commitment. At the end of 12 months, you can choose to be done or continue. Most people continue. I mean, I've had people in NLBA, Next Level by Association. I've had people in the group coaching for years, not just their commitment time.
Well, it sounds like, so everything Next Level is the website.
Yep.
And then what about social media? If somebody wanted to check you out?
Yeah. Then go to Instagram, the Bob Donnell. And that's not an ego play, but somebody stole my Bob Donnell Instagram, hacked it, and I had to change it. I finally got Bob Donnell back, but by then I had already changed everything to the Bob Donnell. And then Facebook, Bob Donnell. And YouTube is Everything Next Level and or Bob Donnell. So those are my most popular ones.
Awesome. Well, I feel like you and I are going to talk about more stuff. It seems that there's a small circle, right? And it's funny how, and I brought up the whole bartending thing on purpose because I think it's funny how people meet and then how things change. And then, the I guess this road that we're on, it's kind of an interesting thing to see, and who knows what the future holds. But I'm pretty sure you and I are going to be talking about other stuff. I have some other things that I'm working on that I would like your insight on, and it sounds like I'm kind of I'm traveling on a road that you've been traveling on. So I think that you'll be able to offer some good insight, and then not only to me, but the people that I'm connected to, because, I believe personally is that the connections that we make is defines or creates the capability that we can step into, right? The capacity.
100% agree with that.
I definitely value everything that you've said, and I think anybody that will be listening to this podcast, they're gonna be nuggets that I think everybody's gonna be able to take away. So, I again very much appreciate your time. Thank you for doing this podcast.
Well, good. Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad that that it's going to serve those purposes, and thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. And for those of you that are listening, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And if you're not listening, I appreciate that too, because I didn't want you to listen anyway. But I love you, but I'm going to have to leave you. And until next time, see you later.